Good afternoon, teachers. Welcome. My name is Annalie, and in this webinar, we will discuss 8 mistakes every teacher should avoid. During this webinar, I will be sharing with you some ideas on how to challenge students in different ways and at different levels. We will also take a look at different ways in which students are going to be able to see language in a different way, paying attention to different sections and different parts. We will also discuss different ways that we can make our students reflect on the class and their own performance as well. We will also take a look at some ideas of receiving feedback from students. All right. So let me share this with you. I truly believe that teaching is a great way to keep learning. We're always learning. All the knowledge that we have as teachers is obtained by the different activities. We keep on trying different things. Some things work, some other things don't work, but still we continue learning, we continue trying. Okay, so let's take a look at some mistakes, some things that sometimes we take for granted, sometimes things that we do not pay attention that much, either because we are so focused on our lesson or we are so focused on following our lesson plan. So the first one, mistake number 1, moving on to the next exercise and the next and the next and the next, right? As we said, sometimes we are so focused on following our lesson plan. Sometimes we ask students or we elicit students the answer to a certain exercise. Students answer correctly, and we just say, great, good, and then we continue, we move on to the next, right? Sometimes students, they really know the answers. Sometimes students, they don't really know why the answer was correct, right? Maybe they were just lucky in that moment, right? What about if we change the scenario, if we change the exercise, are they still able to do it right? Do they really understand language in a way that if I change the exercise, they are still able to identify, right? And make some changes in the same exercise, right? Modifying the exercise or the exercises from our textbooks is something that it is sometimes necessary. This does not necessarily mean that we have to create a different worksheet. Sometimes we do not have time for that. If you have extra copies from your textbook, that's fantastic. But sometimes you want to try something different, right? So I have an example like this one, bam. So you have this classic exercise in which students are going to complete. They are going to use different words. So my sentence goes like this: the cost of building materials has gone up a great deal recently. So students are to use the word sharp, and this is the cue that they have to work on. So you elicit the answers, and they are correct. And then what you do next, you move on to the next exercise, right? Something different. What you can do using this very same exercise, try to focus on different things. For example, you can ask your students, what alternatives do you have to sharp, right? Can you use a different word, right? Also taking into consideration that in English, different words mean different things depending on the context, right? So another thing that you can do is ask, replace recently. Can you find a synonym to replace recently? If we ask students to identify different words here and there, find synonyms, or try to say the opposite of the sentence, right? Try to say something different or try to make it negative, right? Can you say it in 4 words? So without changing the meaning, without changing the essence, can you say it in 4 words? Is it possible? Do you need more words, right? Another way that you can try to modify this exercise is just ask, okay, close your books or cover your sentence. Now, let's see how much you can remember. What is the 3rd word of a sentence, right? Can you remember, right? Or can you spell it? How can you use this word in a different context? What is the longest word in the sentence? Or what was the longest word in the sentence? What was the shortest? What was the adjective, if there's one? Can you remember the verb in the sentence? What tense was the verb, for example, right? So by slightly changing this exercise, you don't need extra copies. It's something differently. So students are paying attention at different words, different aspects of your same sentence, right? In that way, you try to involve all of the students. You try in different levels. So sometimes our students are so trained to fill in the blanks or to complete. They know what to do next, or they know what they are to do. And some of them, they don't even bring the instructions. Just by looking at the exercise, they can predict pretty much what they are going to do. And they just finish, and that's it. I finished, and then I can relax. I have the answers. Maybe they are correct, maybe they are not. But then the teacher or with my partners, we are going to check, right? So, I mean, these exercises are very good, but try not to stay there. Try to move on and try something different, right? So some tips for this, just, I mean, spice it up a little bit. So just give students more opportunities to practice in different ways, different levels. Just giving an exercise a twist does not necessarily mean extra copies. Something that we did was very, very meaningful, right? And it didn't require extra work from the teacher, but it was actually very meaningful for students. That's what we want. That's our objective always, right? Moving on to the next mistake. Mistake number 2 is asking only small questions and forgetting big questions, right? Now, what do we mean by that? What is a big question? A big question is a question that makes students think. They make students reflect and elaborate the answers before they actually give you the answer. Sometimes we are so used to asking just yes, no questions, or questions that do not require that much of a thinking. It's something very specific, right? By asking big questions, students need to actually think, analyze. They need to go, right, and take what they already know, right, their knowledge, their experiences, right? They all know something. They share, they want to share. So what we want to do here is we want to look for this connection, and everybody has something to say, right? So when they feel that there's something rings the bell, they immediately have this need to share it, to express it, to speak, right? So, immediate answers, they are good, but what about if we elaborate a little bit more? And that allows students to discuss, right? An example of this is the following. We have 2 sets of questions. We have small questions and we have big questions. So small questions will be something like, do you like the movie? Or did you like the movie? Instead of asking that, right, you can also complement with the question, what was your favorite part of the movie? Or what was the worst part of the movie? Having this small question, did you have breakfast today? We can also use the question, what is the perfect breakfast? Or what is a healthy breakfast? Instead of asking, what's an insect? What would happen to Earth if insects disappear? So as you can see, this right side of the big questions allow a little bit more of thinking, right? More elaboration, right? There's nothing wrong with asking small questions, but they just target different objectives. See, small questions, you would like to use small questions when you want something very specific, maybe for students to identify a particular word, right? Or the tense of a verb, or something really, really simple, right? But if we include big questions, then, we make sure that our students actually understood the concept or the concepts, right? Or the topic that we are trying to introduce, right? So some tips for using small questions, just quantity, is nice. We're always asking, but we want to look more for the quality, right, of the questions. So we make students speak and therefore develop their fluency. Decide on the purpose of the questions. What is my objective? If I ask this question, what do I want to get, right? Just try to minimize the use of yes, no questions. They are good, but try to complement with big questions as well, right? So using big questions that allow students to express their opinions, their positions. They involve a lot of elaboration and discussion. And try not to over paraphrase students' answers, right? It's sometimes very common when we ask a question and the student answers, say, my favorite coffee is Starbucks. And then you go and say, oh, so your favorite coffee is Starbucks. And then we tend to paraphrase students' answers. That wouldn't happen in a very normal conversation. See, when you ask someone a question, you do not go and paraphrase that person's answer, but instead, what would you do? You would ask another question, or even you would provide that person with your own opinion or your position, right? So that wouldn't happen in a very natural conversation, over paraphrasing students' answers, right? Or people's answers. Paraphrasing is good when you want students to notice a particular mistake when they are speaking, as when they forget a specific word or a connector or a preposition, and you paraphrase in order for students to notice that something was missing. In that case, well, paraphrasing is good. But not when you're trying to elicit just answers and opinions like that, right? Just instead try to ask more questions, try to provide your own opinion, right? Moving on to the next one, we have mistake number 3. Pronunciation is just listen and repeat, right? So sometimes when we work on pronunciation, we focus on specific words or maybe spelling. And in English, there are some sounds that Spanish speakers do not have, right? And it is very important to notice those specific sounds that Spanish speakers do not have, or some sounds that don't exist in Spanish or maybe in any other language, right? So using something simple like this, right? I have my sentence like this. I didn't say he stole the money. You can ask specific questions, right? So instead of just asking students to listen and repeat, you can just ask students to focus. How many E sounds can you find in the sentence? Where, right? Point it out or say it. What particular word, right? Or words have this E sound, right? How many syllables does the word many have, right? Or stole have, right? Where is the stress in the word many? You can ask your students to clap where the stress is, or you can have your students, raising their hands where the stress is. Look at the words in the sentence, which one has the main stress? And then yet again, students are pointing out, or they are raising their hand where the stress in a particular word of the sentence is. Now, if I change the stress in the different words of the sentence, does that change the meaning? How so? Why? Why do you think it changes the meaning? Why not? So if I say I didn't say he stole the money, right? Does that change if I say I didn't say he stole the money, right? So exercises like that, you make students identify particular sounds or focus on chunks of language, words, and then put it all together and identify here and there. I have an example. I have this video that I would like you to watch.
A lesson in inflection. Selling is about communicating, and many times we take our own voices for granted. In today's fast-paced world, many times we're too quick for our own good. I'm Kevin Graham, I'm Managing Director at Empowered Sales Training. Let's look at the following statement, I didn't say he stole the money, and see how it has different meaning depending on the inflection. I didn't say he stole the money infers that someone else said he stole the money. I didn't say he stole the money simply proclaims that you didn't say it. I didn't say he stole the money communicates that you communicated he stole the money in a manner other than verbal. I didn't say he stole the money. That's telling them that perhaps it was her or them that stole the money. I didn't say he stole the money. That emphasis communicates that perhaps he did something with the money other than steal it. Maybe he just borrowed it without permission. I didn't say he stole the money. The emphasis on the is communicating that you didn't say he stole that money, but perhaps other money. And finally, I didn't say he stole the money. That's communicating that you proclaimed he stole something other than the money.
Okay, so an exercise like this this can make students more aware of the different stress that a sentence can have. And then you would like to have this with in practice with a partner, try to identify and stress different parts of the sentence, different words. So if you want to say that he didn't steal the money, what would the stress, or how would you say it? You can also ask your students to say the sentence with different intonations as surprise, anger, happiness, for example, sadness. So they vary. So that in that way, that pronunciation, the pitch will change somehow, right? Other ideas that you can have to practice pronunciation, use some tongue twisters, right? Tongue twisters are great for students, especially if we focus on those particular sounds that are different in English and in Spanish, such as the b and the v, that are very different in English, but in Spanish they might sound the very same, right? And are very difficult to identify. Also, you would like to include the use of minimal pairs such as pair, bear, time, dime. So then you have students practice this in pairs. And if I say bear, you are going to raise your hand. If I say pair, you're going to stamp your feet, for example, or you're going to clap, right? Or you're going to stand up. So they identify particular sounds and minimal pairs, some words that somehow are confusing or that can be confusing for students. So some tips to work on pronunciation: just work on individual sounds, especially those sounds that Spanish speakers do not have. Take some chunks of vocabulary and practice the stress of these words. Words in English have different stress, but also words can have a different stress when they are in the sentence, right? You can ask your students to clap or raise their hands or stamp their feet or stand up to identify where the stress of the word is, right? Or to identify short or long sounds such as E or I, right? Or schwa, for example, right? Just change the meaning of the sentence or sentences by stressing different words in the same sentence in order to to mean different or to change the meaning, right? Also have them practice this different pronunciation with different intonation, right? And different feelings as well. Even try to imitate different accents as well, just so they can have fun, right? And identify different sounds here and there, right? Moving on to mistake number 4 would be taking visual literacy for granted. We are all very visual. We love images. So, did you know that almost 50% of your brain is involved in visual processing? 70% of all your sensory receptors are in your eyes. I mean, basically, the connection to the world is through the eyes, right? If you like it, if you like what you see, you might take it, you might buy it, right? 1/10 of a second is all it takes you to understand a visual scene. So what is visual literacy? Visual literacy is the ability to decode, to interpret, or to create a picture, an image, right? It's also the ability to critically understand and use images to articulate knowledge, right? That also develops critical thinking and creativity. So what we want is our students to pay attention to small details, but also to be able to see the big picture. Now, I have a picture for you. So I'm going to show you a picture, and I want you to look at the picture for a few seconds, please. Okay, there you go. So you have a question right there. So just in your computer, please just answer this question, please. All right, so I'm just going to close it, and I'm going to share the results. So 50% think four women were there in the picture. I will go back to the picture at the end of the question so you can check your answers. Next question. All right, so I'm just going to close this, and I'm going to share your results. So 42% think that the shorts were blue, and 29 black, and 29 green. Interesting. And last question. Okay, so I'm sharing the results. So 38 said 1, 43, 3 people were drinking something, and 18% think 18, 5. All right, so let's go back to the picture. Okay, so how many women were there in the picture? So maybe we have 1. Okay, so maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5. We cannot tell. Okay. What about the man in a red T-shirt? What color were his shorts? So they were actually green, right? And how many people were actually drinking something? Now, everybody seems to, everybody seems to have glasses right there, but they are not actually drinking something. They were drinking something, or they are maybe about to drink something. So maybe this guy right here is drinking something, or is actually about to drink something. So with this type of activities, I mean, pictures are amazing. You can work, I mean, you can work at different levels and practice all of the skills and more than that. So if you have a picture like this, right? Take a look at the place. The place is full. What do you think the place is full, right? There's something about this place. What do you think their famous dish is, or their famous drink is? You might also want to draw students' attention at the tables right here. So for example, take a look at that table at the back right here. Take a look at this woman right here. Look at her expression. What do you think she's feeling? Is she sad? Is she disappointed? Is she mad? Or she didn't sleep well, maybe, right? What do you think they are talking about? What do you think their relationship is, right? Do you think they are going to break up, right? Things like that. Now, take a look at this table right here. What do you think they do for a living, right? Where do you think they live in? In an apartment, a house, right? Okay. So you can also ask students to create conversations based on each one of the tables, right? Give them, ask students to give them names. They can actually create a conversation. They actually present it to the class, and they can take different roles, right? Depending on their personalities and the personality that they might guess that the people in the picture might have, right? You can also ask them to write specific stories. So then write a story about that woman feeling sad, right? What do you think is going on? Or you can also have students link everything, and somehow in this universe, everybody is connected. So why are there all these people, right? In the same place at the very same time? Is there a reason? So then you add some mystery there. So pictures are great. So they are analyzing different aspects of the picture. If you have some low levels, you can start with something like places. What place is this? Colors. You can also practice prepositions, right? Colors, clothing, right? Even food, also countables, not countables, things like that. So there are a lot of possibilities of one single picture, right? And that's what we are interested in. We are so interested in trying to draw students' attention, something that is meaningful, something that students feel connected to. Everybody has something to say. So if we actually provide students with the right material, and if we ask students the right question or questions, I mean, it's easier for them to speak, right? To say it. We are also creating the need for students to speak, to share, right? Since everybody has something to say or to share, at least an opinion or something or a position. Okay. So using images in the classroom, what it's going to do is going to encourage students to pay attention to small details, but also we want to take students to take a look at the big picture. And using images in the classroom makes students speak, develop critical thinking, creativity as well, right? And also that helps students to develop fluency, all right? So some tips that you can have when you are using images: use a different picture from the textbook, something that is totally different. So students don't see, I mean, like, oh, I don't have this picture, that one doesn't come here. So, I mean, then the teacher is doing something differently, right? And they start wondering what it is and why, right? Focus on small details, but also try to see the general picture and ask meaningful questions about the picture. Using the right questions, this is going to really help your students to understand better and to try to see beyond what they see, right? Which is something really, really important as well. Moving on to mistake number 5 is forgetting fluency. Sometimes we try to focus a lot on accuracy, right? We are always focusing on form. We're trying to focus on spelling and all that jazz. But sometimes we tend to forget those activities that are going to make students just speak, or those activities that involve students' opinions and positions, just because we might think that students are not ready or they do not have that vocabulary or the knowledge. And we always want to guide our students and to try to measure, right, the kind of language that they are going to use. I know it's sometimes difficult when you have activities in which fluency is involved, because you know that maybe some students will be asking for vocabulary, or you know that students will be making a lot of mistakes, right? But that's all right. Sometimes we focus on accuracy, on form, right, correctness, and sometimes we focus on fluency, right? So it is nice to have a very good balance between fluency and accuracy. And sometimes fluency is something that is very difficult to achieve. Most of students are always focusing on pronouncing correctly, or they are so worried, they don't want to make mistakes, so they are thinking about the structure and the grammar and all like that. So that too much thinking, right, makes their fluency go a little bit low, right? So it's okay to make mistakes. It's all right if you don't know that piece of vocabulary. Try to find different ways to say that. What other words do you know, or how can you say it in a different way, differently, right? And just speak. So once we get our students in the process of speaking, then later on we want to focus on accuracy, right? Okay, so some activities that you can use in the classroom would be something like this: making things personal. So if you take a look at that, we are using grammar. Now, the grammar will be phrasal verbs, 2 and 3 compound phrasal verbs, as in fall out with, hang out with. We want students to notice that part of the grammar, right? But we also want to make sure that our students are actually understanding that particular phrasal or that particular word or that particular chunk of language, right? Or even the structure. So what you would like to do is to have students complete these sentences. And then you can also go and ask students, how can you say this differently? How can you find a synonym, or how can you say fall out with using different words, right? In the beginning, you will see or you will hear different mistakes. That's all right. So that's why as teachers, we are going to be we are going to open our ears and try to identify the mistakes, right? Just keep them there in your head, or have a notebook or a piece of paper in which you write down all of the mistakes that you hear. And if you want to focus on accuracy, then at the end of the exercise, you can write those mistakes on the board and actually have students work in pairs in trying to correct the mistakes, and then analyze why this is not correct, what will be the right way, right? And try different possibilities, yeah? So by doing things like that, students are going to be engaged, right? When everything is personal, it is easier to identify the purpose. Why am I using this? What do I need this for? Teacher, what is this for? When am I going to use this? Well, instead of telling them, well, when you are going to ask for something, then you use, so instead of explaining the reason why, just trying to provide an example on how you can use that structure or that particular vocabulary that we are actually studying, right? This is a fantastic activity. This is called Think Fast. And what you would like to do, you would like to ask your students to write this down in their notebooks or in a piece of paper. You have, as you can see, you have different numbers there. So you have 1, 2, up to 5. And each box or each number has something in there, right? So you can change this. So this one would make students focus on adjectives, on, you know, a person, or nouns, or adverbs, or verbs, or any other chunk of language that you want your students to work on. And this is how it works. So once students have these numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, you're going to actually give each box or each number something to work on. For example, in the number 1, you're going to write an adjective that describes yourself. It's not a sentence, it's not even a paragraph, just the adjective that describes yourself. Maybe you have so many adjectives, just choose one. It has to be the first thing that comes to your mind. So that's why it's think fast, right? So the first thing that comes to your mind, right? An adjective that describes you. In the number 2, you are going to ask your students, write the name of your favorite person, the name of your favorite person. So it will be someone who is real, or it could be an actor or an actress, I don't know, your favorite person, right? In the number 3, you will ask your students, write a verb that you do at least twice a week, right? A verb that you do at least twice a week. And then in number 4, you would ask, write the number of true friends that you have, the number of true friends that you have. And then they go and write just the number. And number 5, you're going to write the place that you would rather be right now in this very moment, okay? So the place that you would rather be right now in this very moment. And number 6, you're going to write the object that you recently bought, or the object that you recently got, right? So once your students have done this and they have all of their words in the correct number, you would like to ask your students to stand up. They are going to pair up, and you are going just to select a number. So once they find a partner, everybody needs to have a partner. If you have even students, I mean, you can work with them, right? Or with that student. So once they get in pairs, you're going to say a number. For example, number 5. So then students are going to discuss the number 5. So the number 5 was the place that you would rather be in this very moment, right? So maybe they wrote home, maybe they wrote the beach, maybe they wrote the mountains, something, right? And they start sharing. So I wrote this, why, blah. So they start asking, they start sharing, right? It's just a great way to get to know each other, right? And then give them some time, right? And then you ask students to change partners. So they are going to look for a different partner. It doesn't have to be the same. It has to be different, right? So, and then you change the numbers. So change partners and change numbers. So then you do number 1. So the number 1 was the adjective that describes yourself, right? So they go check their book, their list, and they start discussing the adjective. Why, right? Why do you think this? What do you think that? Maybe is the mood they are in this very moment, right? And so on and so on. So you ask them to change partners, and as they change partners, they are going to discuss every single number. So the idea is that you do this 6 times, 1 for each number, right? This activity is great, especially in the beginning of the course when they get to know each other, they break the ice a little bit, or this can be done in any particular stage of your class. You can change the words, right, in the boxes depending on what you want your students to work on, right? So what you're going to do during this activity, you're just going to walk around, and then just listen to your students, and try to encourage students, if they forget a word or if they don't know how to say a word, they can use some help from their partners, or they can just try to say it in a different way. Just say it in a different way, right? You can do it, right? Later, we're just going to focus on those particular words that they were looking for, right? So while you're walking around the classroom, you're listening to some students' mistakes, right? Stay calm, that's all right. We're focusing on fluency here rather than accuracy, right? So once that the activity is done, then students get to share, give some feedback, right? Which one was the funniest number, right? Or the most interesting number. Students might find out that they have more things in common than they thought, right? And maybe there is a student that they never talked to, and they discover that they have lots of things in common, right? So then at the end, what you do, you would like to take those mistakes that you heard, that you wrote, right, or that you have in your mind, right? You're going to write them down on the board, and then you're going to ask students to work in pairs, or you can do this as a whole class activity. Go through these sentences, right? There's something wrong with them. What is it? Why? Something does not sound quite good, quite right. What is it, right? And then students have the opportunity to think, right? What's the mistake, right? What was wrong? What is wrong with this? Can I say it in a different way? So if I change this, I change that, etc. So they get students to actually discuss, right? And activate their minds, right? As well. This is a great activity to practice fluency. So tips when we are working on fluency, try to include activities to personalize language, right? Now, big questions in here are going to be fantastic when you want your students to speak, to personalize, right? Of course, they are going to make mistakes. That's not the point. The point is students work on their fluency, and they can also find different ways to say things, right? And also include students that would make your students want to speak. Yet again, when students feel that connection, they feel identified, and therefore you are creating that need in students to speak. I have something to share. I have something to say about this, right? This happened to me, or I know this, I know that. And everybody learns from everybody, right? So you're building up knowledge, right? They're having fun, and they're practicing fluency as well, right? They can also learn from the partners. Sometimes when we pair students, or when we ask students to do some peer teaching, right? Sometimes they learn the best, right? Or it's just another way to practice and to reinforce. So when you are teaching something to another person, you're also learning, right? So, I mean, it goes to the other side, but it also stays in your head, and it's just a way to review, right? Okay. Moving on to mistake number 6 would be skipping feedback from your students about your class. Now, this might sound like, excuse me, or it sounds scary. Maybe you have never done that, right? Or maybe you would say, okay, Annalie, yes, I have my coordinator or the principal once in a week, or maybe once a month, or once in a semester, go and observe my class. That's nice. That's fantastic. I mean, having a different person, a stranger, right, in your class is great, because he or she can see a different perspective of your class, something that you don't see yourself doing or saying, or you don't actually see because you're so involved in your class, right? And that person can actually give you very nice feedback and useful feedback. Nice, but that person that goes and observes maybe once a month or once a semester, or things like that, might not know your students, might not know your class, might not know your students' needs, something that you know very well. Now, you are the experts when you're in the classroom. You are the expert when it comes to knowing what your students need. You know exactly when the activity is actually working out or it's not. You know when you need to stop that activity, go back, rewind, and start all over again, or do things in a different way. You also are able to identify when a student feels in a very particular way, or there's something going on with a student, right? We know that, right? Those things, or that particular thing that we can see, is just what we can, I mean, it's just very general, and it's something that we see just at a glance, right? But sometimes there are things that we are not paying attention to, things that we do not notice, things that maybe you cannot see, right, until you actually ask or dig in a little bit deeper. Now, feedback is great for students and teachers. Students are so used to receiving feedback from the teachers, right? They see this as a very natural process of their learning, right? They are so used to receiving feedback from teachers. But how often are students asked to give feedback to the teacher? Maybe not that often. And I mean, since they don't do that often, students don't know how to give feedback. They know how to receive feedback, right? Because they are so used to, but they are not so used to give feedback, right? So we need to actually teach them how to give feedback, right? Some of your students might look at you when you ask certain questions, or when you tell them, okay, now you're going to give me feedback. Some of your students might look at you with a what face, saying, why, really? Why, teacher? Is this a tricky activity? So if I give you good feedback, will I get more points, right? Or extra points? And if I give you a bad feedback, will I lose points? It's not about that. This might take students by surprise. That's natural, because that's something that they are not used to doing. So if they have this type of reactions, then congratulations, teacher, because you're the first one in doing this activity, asking students for feedback. And this is so meaningful. When teachers give feedback to students, all of the benefit of the feedback falls on the student. But when students give feedback to teachers, I mean, both win, right? Teachers and students. I'll show you how or why. So having students giving feedback to teachers have different benefits. For example, it helps teachers to reflect on our teaching, of course. It also helps students to get to know our students a little better, or try to understand them a little bit better, even in a deeper way, as to what we are used to seeing, right? Behaviors and attitudes, right? There might be something else there that maybe they are not so used to expressing, or they do feel it and they do not know how to express it, right? Having students give this type of feedback, make students reflect on the class, right? It's like having this rewind button, rewind. And okay, so what did we do first in the class? So we did this, we did that, and then we did this activity. I liked it, I didn't like it. This was too difficult. I struggled with this, I struggled with that. That was fun. So in that way, students are going to review the class, try to remember the class, and also students are going to reflect on the stages of the class or the activities of the class. And also this will make students reflect on their own performance, right? Maybe I could have done it better, right? I know more than that, or I was not paying attention in this particular activity, but maybe next class I'm going to pay attention, right? So by doing this type of activities, that makes your students reflect on their own learning, the process of the class, the stages of the class, and the things that they need to reinforce more, right? And this feedback, right, also helps students to increase student engagement, right? So by students giving feedback to teachers is fantastic. You might want, before you actually go and ask students some questions, I mean, of course, I know you might be thinking, well, I mean, some students might write, oh, the class was fantastic, teacher, except for the part when you set homework. Well, yes, of course, right? I mean, some things are inevitable, right? Some things you cannot change. From this feedback, what we are looking for, we are trying to improve. As we always want our students to improve, right? We want to help them to improve, to grow better, but we can also receive some help from our students to be better teachers, or to change some habits that you might not notice and they do, right? Of course, you're not going to please everybody, right? We know that. But what we are looking in here, some patterns. There might be some patterns in the feedback that you receive. You might see something that is repeated and is there and again and again and here and there and there. So maybe it's something that you haven't noticed, right? So, and then, oh, so you pay attention to that. Maybe you do this unconsciously. Maybe your students think that they feel stressed or afraid all the time. So maybe there's something that you're showing, right? That you have, or you create this some sort of atmosphere, things like that, right? So we're looking for patterns in here as well. So what you like to do first, right? You would like, since students, they might not be used to giving feedback, what you like to do is to teach them how to give feedback. So give them some examples of what mean feedback is and what constructive feedback is first, right? So, and just try to provide some examples and try to remind them you are never mean to them, right? So you expect that from them as well, right? So we want this to be better, right? So by doing so, students are going to see, okay, this is what is expected, right? So some questions that you can ask your students, you can do this orally or you can do this in a written way. So start by something simple. I mean, try not to bomb your students, right? Something simple, one step at a time. So a question that is really, really important and powerful. Name 3 things you learned today, right? And then have some students give you your opinions, right? I learned this, I learned that. What was your favorite part of the class? Why, right? Or what was the most boring part of the class? Why not, right? Oh, the homework, teacher. Oh, of course, right? In the beginning, it will be like that, right? So just be patient. This is the first time they do this. So they might not know how to do it, or they might go like, hesitating, like, should I, shouldn't I? So in the beginning, it's going to be like that. Relax, be patient, right? So later on, they will get used to all these questions and that reflection. You can also ask, what activity did you find too difficult or too easy? Why, right? Is there anything you were expecting to happen in the class and didn't happen? Is there anything you wish would have done more of, right? And questions like that. So in the beginning, you might want to start with one question, right? And you might want to do it orally, right? The first one, name 3 things you learned today. This is the first step that you want to take, right? Later on, you can add 2 or 3 questions, right? The idea here is not to have like a full questionnaire, like a 50, 20 questions. I mean, just some questions at random, right? Maybe 3, maybe 5 questions, meaningful questions. Something important here is to ask the right question, right? Try to keep your question as simple as possible. Try not to keep it like too ambiguous, right? So they get lost in the answer, right? And by doing so, later, I mean, little by little, students are going to get used to this process. We want to have students to have this process of reflecting, right? Of thinking. And there will be a moment in which they will reflect on the class, they will reflect on their performance, right? And they will do this so naturally that whether you ask them those questions or not, they will do this just automatically, right? And we want our students to have that type of reflection that is so meaningful, right? For them and for us, right? Now, some tips when you are using feedback, when you are asking students to give you some feedback. Just first of all, provide examples of constructive feedback, right? Giving some examples, what is mean, what is constructive, right? Let them know what you're expecting, right? Choose the right questions, right? It's all about the questions, right? And just make your students feel comfortable, like they are not going to lose points or get extra points or things like that. It's just, I mean, constructive feedback, right? It's just in a way to get better. So just save the last 5 minutes of your class for the feedback, right? Like once in a while. You can do this orally, of course, right? In the beginning, might be difficult, yet again, some students might not want to speak. They have lots of things to say, but they don't say it, right? But little by little, students will get more comfortable and more relaxed, right? And you can do this in a written way, right? In a written and anonymous way, right? Students don't want to be pitched, right? Still, some students are going to write their names on their piece of paper. It's just fine, but you can keep this in an anonymous way, right? So what we are looking for in here is just for reflection for students and also for teachers, right? And to look for certain patterns that maybe we are not so aware of, right? Yes, so try this out. Is really meaningful. And finally, act on the feedback. So there is no purpose of asking feedback if you just read the comments, right? And maybe you would like the comments, some comments you might not like, right? That's all right. Take it easy. Don't take it personally, right? Don't take it personally, right? Maybe it's just that perception of the students, right? And I mean, it's not personal, right? And just act on the feedback. Try to identify those patterns, things that are constantly repeated, yes, again and again in this group, and then in another group, I find something very similar. So there's something going on in here. And then try to look for different ways to try to change that or to ask for more clarification or something like that. The idea is that you discuss, I mean, you have this discussion with your students, right? In a constructive way, not in a way that I'm just evaluating you or I'm just against you, right? So it has to do, I mean, everything is, I mean, revolves around the questions, the right questions, right? And creating the right atmosphere, right? A very nice atmosphere as well. Mistake number 7, underestimating dictation. Now, in the beginning, you might say, excuse me, dictation is so old-fashioned. Well, yes, it is old-fashioned if you do it the old-fashioned way, right? But dictation is not just about listening and writing, right? Dictation with a twist, right? We're always doing things with a twist. Dictation with a twist can be really, really great and meaningful for your students, right? Dictation involves more than listening and writing. You can actually target different areas by doing different activities, and students can have fun too, right? So some benefits of dictation, right, are dictation can develop short-term memory, right? It practices pronunciation as well. It practices listening and writing skills. And students are mentally active all the time. Dictation is powerful and challenging, all right? Okay, let's take a look at different activities. The first one is called jumbled dictation. So each person in the group gets a sentence from a text, right, in a random order, right? So just select a text. You want to go easy, right? Not too long, depending on the level. Just a nice small short test, right? And then they have to dictate their sentence to the rest of the group. You might want to work this, you can do it as in a whole group, depending on the number of students that you have, or students can work in small groups or in small sections, right? So each one of the members of the group is going to dictate their sentence to the rest of the group. And then when they are done, the group has to put the text in order, right? So, I mean, this practices listening, right? They trying to retain the information, but they are also working. It's not just, I mean, I wrote them down. They are correct. Oh no, they are wrong. Okay, that's it, and move on, right? So you can go, I mean, go and try something different. Give them a twist, right? So they are working in the order, organizing ideas in a text, right? So this is jumble dictation. This is a great activity that students like and is meaningful for them as well. The next one is called the gap. So this one is also great. And this involves a little bit more challenge, right? So choose a short text and remove 8 or 10 words from it, depending on the level. So what you're going to do, you're going to read the dictation to the class in the usual way. But when you reach the gap word, you can clap or you can whistle or just can say gap. So then students know that there is a space just right there. There's something missing or a word missing. And then once you finish, students have to use the context. They can work in pairs or they can do it individually or in small groups or in trios. So students have to use the context to think of a suitable word that would fill each gap, right? They might come up with the right word. They might come up with something totally different or something similar. The idea here is that they are using, they are trying to infer based on the information that they have. They are working in teams. They're collaborating, right? And you're just trying to find a suitable word or words depending on the level and how challenging you want to do this, right? This one is amazing when it comes to dictation. It retains information, but students also have fun and it's in a very challenging way, right? The next exercise is called dictogloss, right? So what you're going to do, you're going to dictate a text to students at normal speech. And so they are going to write some clue words right here and there. Of course, they are not going to be able to write down everything since you are reading at normal speech, right? So the idea here is that students write some clue words, things that they remember, and then in groups, they are going to try to reconstruct the text by using their own notes, right? The idea is not to have the text exactly the same, but they are able to somehow, I mean, without changing the meaning or the essence of the text, I mean, to stay intact, right? So of course they are using different words, so they are going to try and work and use the knowledge that they already have in order to put the text together, right? Or the paragraph together, the idea together, right? This is fantastic, but this requires a little bit more challenge. So as you can see, we go like something easy and then we move on and so on and so on. Try them on and let's see how they worked out for you. Something simple that you can do maybe for lower levels, or if you want to start doing this, what you're going to do, you have a list of words, right? Just random words. You can select the words from the unit maybe, or from the lesson. So you're going to dictate between 10 to 15 words, more or less. So students are just going to listen. They are not going to write anything. So just, okay, listen to me, and you start dictating, such as classroom, coffee, present, Christmas, blah, blah. So you start saying or dictating those words. Students don't write anything. They just listen and pay attention. When you're done, if you want, you can say the list again, twice, maybe. And when you're done, what students are going to do are going to write down the words that they remember individually first, and then what you want to do is in pairs try to complete the list, and you tell them there are 10 words, or there were 10 words in my list. Can you complete the 10 words? Or there were 15 words in my list, right? Can you complete them? And that makes students remember the words that you were saying. They are working on spelling as well, and based also on the context, since they have maybe Christmas and then present, I mean, they might want to think what else would go with Christmas and present. Well, maybe party or something, right? Or drinks, and they might come up with other words that they were not actually on the list, and that's fun. I mean, that's fantastic, right? And that helps a lot to work on the retention of the information. So students try to keep the information, they listen, and they also work on the spelling. Later on, if you want to move on and to make it a little bit more challenging based on those words, you can have your students actually make a diagram or divide those words according to a specific group. All of the words that are related to partying, for example, Christmas, present, this and that, all of the words that are related to school or something like that, or have them just create different sets of words, right? And have them pile them up according to where they belong, right? So they can have different lexical sets. So that works wonderfully. So you might want to start with this one and then move on to the to other exercises that are a little bit more meaningful, right? And challenging as well. And mistake number 8, forgetting graphic organizers, right? So graphic organizers, I mean, they are great, and sometimes we are so used to just using the Venn diagram. That one is great, it's fantastic, and usually we include these graphic organizers when they are doing some reading. So they organize their ideas, they put them in different levels or in different columns. Those are nice, but not necessarily a reading can be not necessarily, not only in reading is when you can include a graphic organizer, right? You can also use it when you are teaching grammar, for example, or when you are teaching vocabulary just at random. just try to organize them, just like the previous exercise. Just try to organize them in different lexical sets. Where do they belong, right? Graphic organizers are great because they help students to organize their ideas. They graphic organizers, some students, I mean, they don't know what to say or how to say it or how to start, but if they see it in a very organized way, it's easier for them to actually understand the vocabulary or grammar or the structure. It's easier for them to remember the vocabulary, the structure, if they see it in this very organized way, not necessarily working with the rules of the grammar, right? But when students have this in diagrams, so they can actually use this in a very critical way. So you can have vocabulary, you can also have grammar, you can also have reading, right? Even a listening, right? So also analytical, critical planning, and creative skills are developed. So how am I going to organize this, right? What different sections am I going to use? What different columns and lexical sets am I going to use in order to organize this, right? And also, students think of the you make students think of this process, right? So the process that happens inside students' brain is actually really meaningful when they are creating these graphic organizers. I have some examples to show you what some graphic organizers can be used for. Ones that are slightly different from the Venn diagram. So the first one right here, we have the spider, right? So the function, it will be adding more details to a single topic, right? Some examples of activities: organizing a party, organizing an event, right? Something like that. So students are going to use this spider diagram to identify the things that they need for the party, right? Or who's bringing what kind of party you're going to have, etc. The next one is this fishbone. The function would be cause and effect, factors associated with a complex topic. For example, effects of banning smoking in from public places, right? The next one in here would be cluster. So the function is just a network of ideas based on stimulus, right? So an example of an activity, it would be just brainstorming. So you just give them a topic, for example, or a word, and based on that word, students are going to brainstorm maybe all of the words that are connected to that word or that particular topic. So for example, if you're thinking about food, all of the things that they can think of when it comes to food, right? What types of food can you include? Or when you're thinking, or if you select the word home, what kind of words can be added in their brainstorming, right? Not only words, but can also be activities, right, in the house, for example, right? And this just is fantastic. It is challenging. It makes students think, but at the same time makes students organize their ideas and how they see, how they visualize it. When you include graphic organizers, this one helps students a lot to remember the words and the information better, faster, because they have this diagram in their heads, right? As when you are using this type of exercises in which you have different flashcards on the board or different pictures, you eliminate one picture and they try to remember what that picture was, or what picture is missing, or what number is missing, or what word is missing. So they have that image in their heads, right? Then again, everything is so visualized and organized as well. All right. So some ideas, some other ideas that you can have are those. For example, you have this cycle. The function will be some sort of events with no beginning and no end, something that goes in cycle. So for example, life cycle of a butterfly, right? Or any other cycle. Also the timeline. The timeline is also a nice way to visualize, right? So the function in here is a topic with a definite beginning and an end, right? So they can see the progress when you work. Well, this is classic when you're working with a biography of somebody, right? So they are to read and they organize um, different stages of the person's life, but also it can be an event, what happened first, this, then, and then what happened. Or it could be also a story, for example, right? Or even if you're working with grammar, for example, you have the present, you have past, right? So using timelines is also very, very important, right? And last but not least, the Venn diagram, right? So the function in here is trying to compare, to identify similarities and differences, right? For example, when you are comparing A with B, right? A book with a film, or just likes and dislikes from different students or different um, places, maybe. Nice points or bad points of doing this or doing that, something that goes in between. For example, there's something that different things can share in a particular way. So by using this Venn diagram is the most popular, I think, right? But you can also have different diagrams as the timeline, the cycle, right? The spider and the fishbone, the cluster as well. So just try this different diagrams. Try to work with this once in a while, little by little. You add this and then you add that, and let's see how these diagrams work. If they are difficult for students, if they are easier. In the beginning, when they see this diagram, they might think, okay, so how do I start? No, but I mean, that's natural, right? But then students get used to doing all this process. So basically what we want to do is we want to get students, we want to develop students different types of ideas and processes in order for them to remember, to store the language, right? And we are also creating good habits in students as well. So in the beginning, it's going to be difficult if they work that way, but little by little, they get used to it. And there will be a moment in which you don't give them any diagram, right? Or any questions or anything, and then they start doing this by themselves, right? Maybe mentally, or maybe they get home and they start doing this diagram on their own, right? And that's great about it. So we are creating good habits in students as well. So some tips when using diagrams: just identify the objective of your activity, what you want your students to achieve, what you want your students to work on. You can also have your students draw the graphic organizers on a big paper and then share with a different partner or different teams if they work in teams, right? So those are very, very meaningful activities, and students have fun. It is challenging in the beginning, but challenge is what we want. We want students to feel challenged. We want our students to feel they can do this. In the beginning, sometimes they are clueless, but as they move on and as they continue doing so, right, and just don't give up, you can do this, and then they get used to it. Oh, and then everything just flows beautifully, right? So in a nutshell, right? So just do not just move on to the next exercise and the next and the next, right? Just try to give a twist to different activities. Not necessarily those activities need extra worksheet or extra work from the teacher, right? So just by giving this twist, try to make students identify, analyze, and see different sections of the language, vocabulary here and there, right? In different ways, different levels, remembering also that our students learn in different ways as well, right? Ask big questions. They are so powerful and meaningful for your students, right? Those questions make your students think, make your students speak, right? Share ideas, thoughts, positions, feelings even, right? Pronunciation is not just listen and repeat, right? So just try to vary the activities, right? Try to modify or change something nice and fast and fun that you can try when using pronunciation. Paying special attention to those sounds that Spanish speakers do not have, and they are slightly different, right? The stress that is also very important, right? Rhythm, right? Try to develop visual literacy. So try to include images, try to involve, ask questions, especially ask them, how does that picture or that image, depending on the picture, make you feel, right? What do you think of this? What do you think of that? Do you think that person in here is okay? Is there something wrong with the picture? Something is missing, right? Or just hide some sections of the picture, right? So they can see what's missing. Is there something funny in the picture, right? And try to involve all of the skills, right? It is easy with pictures. Then include more fluency exercises so students have the need to speak. Yet again, everything is connected. So when we personalize, when we ask the correct questions, students feel motivated. That triggers students to actually use the knowledge that they already have, and they have a reason to share, right? Ask your students for feedback. This is something that might take you by surprise or might sound like, ooh, scary. I might not do this. Just try it. It's all about asking the right question, right? Go easy. Do not bomb your students with lots of questions. If you want, if you don't feel so sure about this, you might want to if you want, don't tell your student that this is going to be feedback for you. If you want, just tell them that you're going to give them some questions. So it's important for you to know their opinion, right? If you're not so sure. But I think it is important to also make students aware that they can actually give feedback. The idea of having students reflect on the things that you do in class, the exercises, the different exercises, materials that you include in the class are important, and they have a reason, not just because the teacher wants to, or just because, right? Just because. By making students reflect on the process and the different stages in the class, that also makes students reflect on their performance as well, and that retains the information even better. They remember better, right? Try this out. Try this out. Trust me, it is really, really useful. Include dictation activities that involve more than just listening and writing. Dictation, as well, in the same way as just listening and pronunciation, is just more than listening and repeating, or just listening and writing, right? So you can give these activities a twist. If you do dictation in the old-fashioned way, but then it might be boring. And still, for those beginners, you might want to use some dictation when you're actually focusing on spelling. But just try to give this dictation a twist and not try to do it in a very old-fashioned way, right? Not that old-fashioned is bad. I like old-fashioned for some things, right? But we're trying to improve, to be updated, right? To try something different though, right? So just take that risk and see how it goes, how it works out, right? Things that you might want to change. We will never know unless we try, right? And also include graphic organizers, right? So in that way, you make students organize their ideas better. And by doing this type of exercises, students get more familiar on how to organize their ideas, how to say things in a better way, or in a clearer sort of way, right? Okay, so I guess we have reached to the end of this webinar. So let me know, which idea are you going to try first, right? I would like you to try at least one of these 8 ideas or different ideas that we discussed in this webinar. See how they worked out for you, and well, you let me know, right? So thank you very much for being here. My name is Annalie. This is my email. If you have any question or if you have some comments, please let me know and email me, right? Thank you very much, teachers. I hope this was somehow useful. See you around, and happy teaching.